everybody on YouTube, I'm Owen H. Welcome to What's It Worth? And today I'm going to review a movie that's kind of been forgotten over time, and it's one of those really hard to find gems, in which that movie is Prophecy. To settle rising tensions between a lumber company and an Indian tribe in Maine, Dr. Robert Verne and his wife Maggie travel there to file a report for the Environmental Protection Agency to break a deadlock over who owns the land. But their investigation unravels startling mutations born as a result of mercury polluting the environment, leading to a terrifying encounter with a vicious, deformed grizzly that hunts them at night. Now, if you recall seeing this bit, or this bit, that means you've seen this movie before. Prophecy was one of those movies that kind of dropped off the radar. There's some people out there that wanted to forget about it, but luckily, thanks to people who've grown up on monster movies like myself, there is no way that this film is going to stay buried. And I will tell you the truth, I actually really enjoy this movie, even though there is a downside that I'll get to in a minute. Prophecy is one of those movies where it's like, you know, what's not to like about it? I mean, you got a great ensemble of actors. You got Talia Shire of Rocky and the Godfather. You got Robert Foxworth. You got Richard Dysart from John Carpenter's The Thing. You got Armand Assante, who we all know as Rico from Judge Dredd. We got Victoria Racimo, and the guy who plays as her grandfather in the movie, Mirai, I remember him from an old movie called Nightwing. The second plus to this film is the story, which is screenwritten by David Seltzer, whose work we know is The Omen. It was like the story was really good. However, you get some hints in the film that there's pieces of it missing, in which he covers in his novelized version, in which I've heard reportedly that his book version of Prophecy is way better than the film. I like the guy who directed this film because he did a really good job freaking you out in so many ways, and it's even got splashes of Hitchcock in it, and it's like, it's one of those kind of movies where it has some visual shocks, which kind of surprises me that it doesn't get an R rating, but also it's meant to freak you out psychologically. Another thing I love about this movie is it's got this quality that Paramount Pictures, like from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, like they have this visual style, they have like a certain charm to them that makes their movies really stand out, really memorable, and just kind of gorgeous to watch. Because like with this movie, when you look at the screen and you look at all the environment around the characters, it's like you're looking at a painting of some kind, like coming to life. And that's what I love about Paramount's old movies. And it's such a shame that they don't really do that anymore. However, the film does get a lot of negative criticism, and that's because of the monster Katahdin, which was a deformed grizzly bear that was born from the result of the pollution in the environment. Now, the idea of the creature is absolutely scary because you could believe something like that to actually exist in real life, but it was how the creature was executed, it was very poor. You'll probably hear about it in other reviews where they cut up on this creature so bad, where they're like, oh, it looks like crap, the mechanics were obvious. There's some snippets where it looks like a guy in a crappy bear suit, and it's like, it's almost laughable. I'm gonna confess that's a bit harsh. Okay, I will agree, yes, the creature was poorly executed and it was poorly designed. But you gotta remember, it was the 1970s leading into the 80s, so practical creature effects wasn't exactly top-notch back then, like, especially with animatronics. And you're probably one of those going like, oh, don't give me that crap that it's the 70s. Jaws was the 70s. Star Wars was the 70s. Even Alien was the 70s. Hold on, give me a minute. With Jaws, the only reason they were able to pull off the shark in that film is because it's just a giant fish. that expresses no emotion in their face. Plus, you don't see it till the very end of the film, and above all, it was filmed in the water. So, of course, when it's like moving around and about, it looked absolutely and terrifyingly real. Now, with Katahdin, they gambled with trying to pull off a practical grizzly bear and a land animal with muscles in the face that expresses emotion, like when they snarl, when they narrow their eyes, when they roar. And animatronic animals wasn't really quite top-notch back then, especially with the fact they couldn't really pull off quadrupedic puppets until like the 80s when they did American Werewolf in London, which, yeah, it did make it look less realistic when it was on its hind legs the whole time, since it looked like it was made in somebody's garage or living room. Yeah. And of course, the same criticism fell upon the infants that Katahdin gives birth to. And yeah, there was actually one snip where it looked like the eye of the puppet, like it almost popped out of its skull, and it's like, ooh boy. With Prophecy, it's one of those movies where you kind of wish Stan Winston did his creature designs earlier and then jumped on this film, because if Stan Winston actually worked on Katahdin, you would get a whole different monster, and it would actually become like an award-winning success between his best creature effects with the top-notch cast and an excellent screenplay. But since he didn't get his prime in until like the mid-80s, where Katahdin's laughable as you're an adult, if you were 8, 9, 10 years old, that creature would have an effect on you. It did on me. I saw it when I was like 4 or 5 years old. I didn't really care much for it. I was like, but then when it came to age 8, my dad felt like it was a great idea to put in and have me watch Grizzly. If you've seen the movie, you can see where this is going. And that's where my pre-existing fear of bears came from. And then when it came to age 10 or 11, and I saw Prophecy again, and I realized that that monster in the movie was a deformed grizzly bear, that creature actually gave me nightmares. Thanks, Dad! So, you can see that this film definitely had an impact on me, and after that experience, I actually loved that movie ever since. And it took me so many years to find this movie. And when I say it's hard to find, I mean you cannot find any reprints anywhere. Oh, eventually I did find it at a local library, and I went, oh! However, it's not a complete loss, as the film was re-released on Blu-ray. However, I think the one part of the film that kind of brought the movie down for me was this scene. Huh. I don't know, just the idea of this guy managing to overpower, eat a grizzly bear with just an arrow, I found that very unbelievable. If they remake this movie somewhere down the road, please change the ending, because that is absurd and ridiculous. And when you watch it, the ending's almost laughable, and it was such a good climax too, and it's like their end result was just, what the f***? Well, the thing is, the director probably told him to hold it that way for a reason. Because A, he doesn't want to stab somebody possibly operating the tongue and nick the guy, go, oh God. And second, if he stabbed the puppet and he broke it, they are completely screwed. Because creature designing is not easy, and puppets are not cheap. And I think a lot of the budget was spent on the traveling, the actors, and above all, the creature itself, which they probably did like, what, 3 versions of the thing? Or it's not like something you could just rip open, fix it, tap, patch it back up, and we're good to go. However, if I wrote this film, this is how I would have ended it. So they have the epic climax with the bear. Vern doesn't waste his last shell. He just grabs his rifle, gets his wife, get outside, and he looks at the side of his cabin, and they could have scripted that there's a propane tank right there. the smartest thing what he would have done is just rip the tank out, get the bear's attention as soon as it comes towards him, kick the tank by the creature's feet, use the last shell, shoot the tank, and it blows like most of its lower half away, and then it tumbles into the lake, dying from shock. That would be the smartest and probably the best way to end that movie. But, of course, you know, they were probably on a budget, so they had to make do with an ending that they had. So what Prophecy was trying to convey in their storyline is the harsh realities about pollution in our environment and how it affects not just the animals, but the people in it, and the consequences that comes from negligence and greed from the lumber company using mercury on their pre-treated wood, and it contaminates the water supply and the fish life in it. Which in the film, that's why you end up with a raccoon that you think was turned to mush, and that's why it became vicious. For the record, no, they did not kill a real raccoon, if you're wondering. And that's also including a 5-foot salmon and a tadpole the size of a football. However, in the film, they do make it a point to show you how mercury affects a human being in the most horrific way possible. But they did describe in the film how the Indians, they would stagger and they would fall and they act like they're drunk when they are clean living fishermen. What a little bit of is when Mariah is smoking a cigarette. When his granddaughter removed it from his hand, he has burn marks in between his fingers, but the fact that he didn't feel it meant that the mercury affected a part of his brain. In the film, they do explain stillborn children and children that were born deformed.
And I've seen children born dead, born deformed.
So badly some of them had to be put to death.
Now, he said some were so bad they had to be put down. So that means there might be other ones that were minorly deformed, but they're still alive. So it kind of makes you wonder, where are the other deformed children? I think in the film, Dr. Vern's collecting blood from the Indians and Talia Shire's looking around. I think they should have shown like a few seconds of 1 or 2 deformed children that are the result of the mercury poisoning. If they do remake this movie, they should use that, because that would be enough to horrify audiences and just hit them the hardest, like where they live. Because sometimes deformed animals just isn't enough. When it's done to a human being, it is way more horrific. And speaking of remakes, I'm surprised out of all the movies, all these old movies that Hollywood has remade throughout time, I'm surprised Prophecy isn't one of them. And it's such a shame, because the film kind of deserves a remake, mostly to improve on the creature effects. But the characters in the story, they could kind of remain the same. I mean, it's like, if I remade this movie, this would be my cast call. Keep the story the same, I would make it more like the book. But yeah, I would definitely put that ending in there, and then maybe expand on it where the last deformed bear you see right before the credits roll, I would probably bring him in as almost like the final monster these exhausted survivors have to fend off. Though, I think the reason they're not going to remake this movie is more for the actors' benefit, because they did a fantastic job in this film. And it's like David Seltzer, he was frustrated because he wasn't too happy with how the creature turned out, practical-wise. So, I read somewhere he actually walked off the set. He was like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm out. Maybe somewhere down the road, Prophecy might get a remake, except they have to change the title. They can't call it Prophecy, because people are going to confuse that version of Prophecy with the Christopher Walken version, The Prophecy. And if they ever do remake Prophecy, please bring in either Stan Winston's team to work on this new version of Katahdin, or bring in the team that brought in creepy ass bear from Annihilation. Which, I'll tell you, that is the second scariest bear I've seen in movies. Where would I rate Prophecy? You know what? I'm gonna give this an almost full price rating. And that's because, despite the fact the creature was poorly executed, it's the actors and the story that makes this movie worth watching. If you've never seen it before, go see it. I'm sure it's streaming somewhere. I don't know where. Okay. So, I'm done reviewing Prophecy. I'm going to move on with something else. So, please comment, please subscribe. I'm Owen H. Have a nice day.